head up the product engineering within Sasken, so we work with a whole bunch of automobile guys and semiconductor guys, so we sort of understand the connected car really well.
Okay. I'm Hans Dahlberg, happy to be here. I'm heading up Global IT Solutions for a company, the leading mobile operator in North of Europe. We have some initiatives in the connected car space that we want to serve a retrofit solution as well, just the other day. So, but we are mainly a company in company. We have product development, product management, marketing and sales, so we are purely IT when it comes to connectivity in cars.
Hi everyone, my name is David Holacek. I'm working at Volvo Car Group, and I'm the Director of Connected Products and Services, so basically commercially responsible for the connected solutions that we bring both in and outside of the car.
Okay, great, thank you. So in the conversations that we've had with automakers, I know this idea of creating services you can monetize around the cars are really interesting, because the question comes up, how many more units are there available to sell? So how other ways can you monetize a car? So maybe David, we'll start with you from the perspective of an OEM. What, where does it stand today? What's worked so far? And let's kind of focus on the current state.
Exactly, so the current state is something that's ever-changing, I think, from day to day. So today's state is really that we see that there's been a lot of media hype regarding connectivity and connected cars and so on. We do feel that at this point, usage, so human behavior isn't fully adapting at the same pace as we are developing new solutions, which is both good and bad. I think that it gives the industry a bit of time to get everything together, to package things in a nice way. From a monetization perspective, from our side at Volvo, we certainly at this point feel that it's something that's adding value to consumers, to customers. So enhancing the value and attractivity of our cars, rather than trying to create sort of new businesses and generate more revenue from specific services.
So just one more question for you before we move on, just to kind of reset where Volvo is. I know the previous presentation you talked about how Nissan is looking to bring this to everyone. Where does Volvo sit? Are you more on the premium side, or what's the direction? Again, I know they're changing, but as of like right this moment.
Definitely when it comes to connectivity, we're going sort of full speed ahead across all our car lines. So we actually launched 2.5 years ago, we launched full connectivity options on all our existing cars, so not just the top of the line cars, but all the cars in the whole range. And we do see that in very few years from now, all the cars will actually be fully connected in themselves and not just have connectivity enabled from the factory, basically.
Okay. So back to the question of what's worked so far. One of you want to take your answer?
Well, I think, as pointed out of the Stuart was from Nissan, I think we are in a phase of where the industry changed. So from a telco perspective, of course, we see that the OEMs, the car manufacturers, are now connecting cars. We see that because there is this kind of big growth in that. I think the really important step that we are addressing now is actually to build these kind of ecosystems that Stuart talked about. Because on one side we see the car manufacturers are moving into very nice features around the car, that you can control the car and everything, and also taking some steps, especially Volvo, with building an ecosystem around the car. You have in-car deliveries of groceries, for instance, in Sweden. I think that's the first steps, because I think we need to look at the consumers, how they handle the car, because even though if I'm buying a car, I have some preferences, of course. If my 20-year-old son will buy a car, he has his preferences. And my old grandma, she has probably other preferences. I think it's, why are we actually using cars? Some of us are using a car to take us to the office. Some of us are driving the kids. And my 20-year-old son will just drive around and flash it off. So it's different. And I think, very much like the internet in the early days, it's about building ecosystem of services. So if I have a car, I could say, okay, I have it because I need it. It's a cost for me. So I want to reduce the cost, hence I maybe go into pay-as-you-drive services with an insurance company to decrease the cost. Maybe I say I need to have Wi-Fi entertainment in the car because I need the kids to be connected when I go to the summer house or winter house, because I want to have it calm when I drive the car. Or I just want to have a number of features to show off. So I think when we are addressing these new markets, we need to think about the data that you guys have and also the consumers are producing. Then we could build services on top of that. So actually, I think, as you said, and very much like Paul, you need to open up this kind of environments in order to build services around the surroundings of the car, I think.
So yeah, let's start with a different perspective on this, right? So let's understand what connected means, and then I think that's where my perspective starts. Getting connectivity into the car really means that you're going to get an LTE pipe into the car, right? And if you just look around and say, how many of them are really working fine? Where are those LTE pipes and how many of them are actually talking to a car? So let's get that connected part right. I mean, it's important to have a reliable data connection that's getting into the car. Only when you have that, a reliable continuous data connection, can you actually start building services, which has referred to as well. So I think we're still, a lot of us are trying to solve the problem of having reliable connectivity that's right through your drive. If you have patches of good connectivity, then it drops off, and then if you have services like video streaming, that's not going to work, right? So the ability to have connectivity is the first part. Once you have that right and solved, it could be with LTE, it could be as we sort of evolve onto heterogeneous networks towards 5G. I think that's going to be there. And then you start building services which could be media intensive, like streaming content, or it could just be text intensive, like like the car sending status information on what it is doing from a telematics perspective. I think today, not everybody has solved the problem of trying to get the connectivity to the car in a very, very reliable way. I think that's where the problem is.
So do you two agree with that definition of the connected car?
Well, I think connectivity is, of course, king.
So, I mean, it's in the title. Right?
No, yeah. It's a very good decision to answer that question. But, of course, it creates a foundation, as you say. You need to have quality services when it comes to connectivity. Otherwise, it's very hard to have additional features in the car, or the ecosystem, as I talked about, of course, is fundamental.
I would add to, of course, connectivity is king, for sure. But we do feel that is something that will sort itself out. We're not there fully. There are issues, there are problems, challenges, and so on, but that will be solved within the next couple of years. The more interesting thing is to look at sort of the new kind of services that this can bring. So not just trying to solve the technical problem, but rather trying to understand what kind of new experiences can we bring to customers that actually give them value back. So I think that is sort of the more interesting thing. And also back to the comment regarding ecosystems and so on, is that we, at least from a Volvo point of view, do not really want to or believe in creating our own ecosystem. We do not want to have sort of Volvo App Store and Volvo specific services. We want to be part of people's daily sort of digital lifestyles, of their own digital ecosystems. So to sort of have the car as part of people's ecosystems rather than creating a separate bubble with separate services. So that's, I think, the key challenge.
So Ashwin, back to your conversation there. So when you said that the key is the actual connectivity itself, do you say that as if that's in doubt? Or do you believe agree with these guys where that's just something that's going to figure itself out, just a matter of time?
No, I think he's right. But the important thing is that it needs to be good and reliable, right? Think of what happened with the phone, right? You've got a whole bunch of services out there, but those were ahead of its time. So building services without reliable connectivity means that you're setting it up to fail. You're setting up user experiences to fail, which is the most critical part that people are going to turn away. But it's important to start getting that right. But the most critical part is to have reliable connectivity, because inevitably what happens, just look at the usage patterns on the phone, and I know that the way you use your phone shouldn't be the way you use your car. A lot of people get that mixed up and saying that it's just the phone and the car are the same and connectivity is the same, but it isn't. But inevitably, the moment you get connectivity, you just use up all the bandwidth on it, right? You're always topping up your data packs, you're always finishing up your data that you use out there. And that's going to be no different when you have a connected car as well, right? So I'm firmly of the belief that get that right, certainly innovate around the services, don't treat the car like a phone. I mean, it's something very different, and that's a point I can't emphasize enough.
Okay. So David, to your comment about Volvo doesn't want to create the ecosystem. So I've talked to auto manufacturers before, and I guess there's a conversation about, if you do that, then you have the fear of potentially falling into the background behind the, Google or Apple or Microsoft or somebody that would have that part. How's Volvo's take on that? I mean, do you accept the fact that sometimes we'll be in the foreground, sometimes in the background? I mean, is it a struggle? I mean, how do you guys approach that?
It's definitely a dual approach, and you could sometimes classify it as a struggle. We actually do not see it like that. When we work very closely with Apple, with Google, with Microsoft, with everyone else, and so on, and we see that we bring a lot of value from sort of understanding people, people's behavior, and especially in the car context. And that is vastly different from what these companies are sort of in their level or area of expertise, which is a lot around smartphones, tablets, maybe PCs, and so on, that they do not intrinsically understand the nature of being in a car and what that requires in terms of the experience and the reliability and all those aspects.
Do you think they have interest in that, or are they willing to concede that it's not their area of expertise?
At this point, we have seen this as a very sort of fruitful relationship, where they do acknowledge that they cannot be masters of everything. So we do sort of provide our piece to that cake, and it basically makes the cake larger.
Okay.
Yes, please. Not broken, but if we take the big OTT players of the world, we also should understand, if I buy a Volvo in Stockholm, my ecosystem is very local. It's the local repair shops, local insurance companies, so on and so forth, inspection firms. There aren't these kind of Apple inspection firms. I mean, so you need to build this ecosystem locally, meaning a lot of hubs with a local ecosystem. Otherwise, it won't give me any big values. Of course, maybe I could have Apple Music or Spotify, but if you take all activities around the car, I think the repair shops, insurance companies, they stand for the vast majority in the ecosystem compared to the infotainment type of things.
So how much does that, because earlier you mentioned how you might have several drivers, and I think that Chelsea pointed out is that could be several drivers in the same car. It's not that each other are, right? So between that and this whole local idea, how complicated does that make it? Or is that just something else that'll sort of figure itself out? Or is that the complicated part?
In terms of having many as well, from a telco perspective, and then I'm not talking about the sharing economy around the car. We have one aspect, and that's actually the privacy aspect of having different users of the car, because then who's handling the data? Is it mine data? Is it ecosystem's data? And that's a thing we need to figure out, because it's end of the day, it's often the consumer as such that owns the data. But if you are sharing one car, then you need to divide the data from different users. So that needs to be figured out over time as well. Otherwise, it won't work regulatory-wise either.
Right. So does everyone agree that the data belongs to the consumer? Everyone's saying, okay. Okay, there used to be a debate, but apparently it's not a debate anymore. So that's good. So let's get into the actual monetization piece.
But say again, like safety, if I could take all the information from all cars, not only Volvos, and send them, say that I am on a slippery road in Sweden, send that information backwards to the other cars, not only Volvos, then I get a real benefit of it. But then again, security is Volvo's trademark, and they may develop and invest a lot of money into this, then someone needs to share that investment as well. So I think that's a big challenge in actually sharing data within the community of car manufacturers and outside as well.
That seems to be a key in all these IoT conversations. It's like, everyone's individual experience impacts the entire ecosystem, right? So it would make sense for Volvo to share that data and have other cars also benefit from other manufacturers, because it, like, all boats float kind of idea, right? Or do you agree with that statement?
Totally, and we launched just a couple of weeks ago. We launched the slippery road alert, satellite alert, which basically warns other Volvos if the road is a bit slippery and so on. And we have said very clearly, publicly, that that is data that we will not be charging for. We want to open that up. So we are in discussions with several other OEMs and so on. We want to create that as a sort of open platform in that sense. I mean, we've done that with the 3-point safety belt, for instance, which we invented and gave to the world because that can save lives. And this is the same thing when it comes to connected safety. There should not be any monetization. That needs to be clear, at least from our side.
Sure.
So I have a different take on this one. I think monetization is important, but it ties it up with the data sharing aspect that we brought up out there. There are demographics that are very willing to share data. Where the younger you go, I think they don't mind sharing a lot their happy to put it out there. And the older you are, you're not going to be so willing to share data. There's a geographic shift in terms of the willingness to share data. China is really willing to share data with a lot of things in return for services. So earlier, I mean, I have this interesting theory that there used to be a price point for services, right? If you create a service, you pay for that, and that's a price point for that particular service. So you need to pay that price point. I think that's going to shift to a data point. You're going to have data points, and then there's a data point for service. I'm willing to put that data point out, and in return for that, are you going to be able to get services? So we're going to be seeing price points shift to data points, and what are the data points you're willing to put out there, and in return for that, get services. I think that's what we're going to be looking at. But that's a mindset that's already there. If you look at the Twitter generation and if you look at the Facebook generation, they're happy to put everything out there and return and get a bunch of services.
And if something happens, they will kill them in social media.
But I think the key is that the consumer has to feel like they're getting value back. Whether it's a data point or a price point or whatever, right? I mean, I'm assuming everyone agrees with this statement that. Right?
Well, I mean, so the thing is that when we brought our phones and then we loaded up Gmail and we got it, we said, I agree, and then everything is out there, and now we use Google now like it's it's second nature at this point in time. So there is value that's coming back in this context, and I think we need to be able to try and create equivalent value generation points in the car context as well, right? It's cool for me to say that I have a meeting coming up now and you need to leave for the airport, etc. on my phone. Does that really matter in the car? And you need to be able to look at those use cases and say that create those use cases that actually bring equivalent value of that, like what Google now, for example, does out here. And I think that's going to be key for this kind of an ecosystem.
Other thoughts on that, or?
I agree. I think that is a valid point. And coming back to the context of being in a car being so much different from the smartphone experience. We talked about personalization and the need to be able to switch between different people in the same car and so on. Well, that is a bit of a challenge, definitely for the automotive industry, but just think of it in terms of your tablet or smartphone. How easy would it be for someone else to borrow that for a day or two? It's not that easy. I mean, basically you need to wipe the whole thing and restart over. So it's not sort of as easy as just sort of logging out and logging in. Right. There is more to it.
So let me ask a follow-up question to that. So you kind of mentioned the sharing economy, and then you went quickly away from it. So let me go back to it, and I guess go to you, David, because that it's different if you loan your tablet to a family member than if you loan it to a stranger, right? And I'm assuming with the car that's even exponentially more complicated. So maybe talk about that a little bit, how the sharing economy potentially plays into this.
That is a very interesting topic in itself. Yeah. We do see. Actually, we don't think that there's going to be one single answer to that, actually. There's going to be multiple ways. Making it easier for you to lend your car to someone sort of close by, be it in the family or a colleague or something, that's definitely going to be perhaps the most well-used feature when it comes to car sharing and so on. The other side of the spectrum is car sharing, more sort of location-based, station-based, that you have cars that you have access to and can borrow but from more of a company or an entity. That's the other side. In between, there's two pieces, basically. One is that if you have a fleet of cars within a larger company, like company cars and so on, they, of course, can be much better utilized if you can share them easily between each other. The other part is then the pure peer-to-peer car sharing. So when you're not using your own private car, being able to get some money out of renting that out to someone else. That is an interesting venue. We are looking into it. I'm not 100% certain how large that will be.
Right. It's a tough one because the numbers say, your car is not driven way more than it is driven. So it seems logical that that would be a great opportunity space. But your point is that may sound like a great opportunity space, but you're wondering how we could get there. Is that what I'm hearing? Or?
There's actually many things to it because there are a lot of studies saying that the car is not utilized 87% of the day. But it's not utilized in the sense that it's not on the road going somewhere. But you may have your golf bag in there. You may have some other things sort of that are in the car. You may need the access so that you can quickly get sort of transportation from point A to B at any point in time. That sort of means that it is in use, even though it's not actually driving right now. So we need to be careful in that aspect. And the second aspect is the notion of lending out something which is quite costly to a stranger. We are seeing more and more in that sort of orientation, like Airbnb, for instance, and so on, and especially among the younger generation. But it might be a while before you are actually okay with just renting out your car to anyone else. And there's a lot of things that need to be secured when it comes to insurance, in terms of all these kind of processes around.
And that's when you have to start thinking about things like shared ownership and all that, so you're not loaning it out. And I get your point also, because just because your car is sitting in your garage doesn't mean you might not need it if an emergency were to happen. So would you really want it out on the road? So I get that. So the last round of questioning, I want to talk about, so we were talking about getting from here to there. And one thing that I hear sometimes in these conferences that's a little troubling is when you talk about you need to convince consumers that it's what they want or that it's good for them or whatever. And we're strongly of the belief that you can't really go convince people. They have to want it, right? So maybe talk about that a little bit and kind of your perspective on how we get there. Understanding that you're not just going to build it and they will come, sort of thing.
Sure. I just have a couple of points on the earlier thing. So I think you need to look at it as asset as a service. There are a couple of examples there. An extreme, really different example is an ATM. It's a service out there. You just go and the moment you put in your card, there's a context that you transfer into that, and then the moment you take out your card, the context goes out, right? I think there needs to be a mind shift towards that kind of a thing, saying that look at the car as an ATM. It's an extreme thought, but then I think we will progress to that. It's not going to happen right away. It's going to happen in maybe 5 years and 10 years time, right? That's the way we happen. So once that shift happens, it's going to be easier for people to let go, right? And Airbnb is a great example, right? You actually have a personal asset that you're willing to put out there, and then have people coming in, complete strangers, and then there's this level of trust, and there's a level of grading them, if you will, to say that there's a good guy, I'm going to let him in for the night, use the couch, etc. I think that paradigm is going to get applied to a lot more assets. Car is going to be just one of those examples, but then asset as a service, I think, is where we're going to be headed at. Right? So that's my thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's many things that actually are impacting whether the consumer is not thinking this is a good service or not. First of all, we have the big megatrends of globalization, urbanization, sharing economies, generation differences, as you said. I mean, if you take my generation, we bought CDs. I mean, think about it. I feel old when I say that, compared to my kids. They are the sharing economy. And of course, my first car, I looked on the car and was it a good color? Was it sporty enough? I think next generation, they will not care. They will have the same type of internet services. That's more important. Of course, there are many things, but again, as you said, you need to understand the context where I come from. So you need to ask the customers, what kind of services do you really like? And try out some services as well, because we don't really know. That's the thing. And go back to internet. Just as an example, if we take Facebook, it was a great day for Mark Zuckerberg. I met him in Barcelona a couple of years back, or if it was my great day. However, I think he didn't recognize Facebook as being a tool for customer services, one of the biggest tools we have as mobile operators. He thought about it as communication in between students. So there are adjacent industries that we could learn from and actually try out things. So to some extent, we could, of course, ask the customers and look into adjacent industries, but we need to try out and go from the aspect, from the car, what is really important for them.
So the way that you could monetize it may look very different in the future, but you have to get there by trying things.
Yeah.
So David, final comments then?
Fail fast.
Yeah.
Fail forward, right?
Fail forward, even better. No, but I totally agree with that. I mean, it is really, I mean, there is no holy grail. It is a lot about trial and error. From our point of view at Volvo, it is extremely much about understanding behavior. Studying what people are doing in their cars, and not just in the cars, but in their daily lives, and trying to understand the pain points and what the car could do to relieve some of those pain points. That is the core thing that the car can bring, and the value that we feel that we can bring to customers.
Great. So we have 2 minutes if there's questions from the audience. Go ahead. Yes, you. Oh, with the glasses. There you go. Can you speak up a little bit? Sorry.
Who will pay for the connectivity of the car?
Did you hear the question?
Volvo? Customer?
They're pretending they didn't hear the
We'll make the operators pay. We will build it and they will pay.
You like the audience thing, yeah.
It's normal.
No, but all joking aside, there is not going to be one single party that's going to pay. It depends on what kind of service it is and who it brings value to. So we are totally looking at it from a sort of a multiple ways sort of in and out of the car, where we can clearly say that this data is something that we should pay for in general. This is maybe part of a campaign where we want to do that transaction in terms of the data and so on, so we pay for that as well, and other parts that are totally user initiated. But it all needs to be totally seamless. That's the key to making that happen.
And coming back to your point, I think it's the relevance. If I'm actually sharing data, I need something in return. So then you have the connectivity cost as a part of it, but then often the one who actually supplied this service benefits from it. So then that kind of actor takes the cost for it, and as you say, it could be on the B2B side. You need that kind of information in order to develop next generation Volvos. Then Volvo will pay for it. Then you have maybe infotainment system, and that's packaged with some other services. Then you, as a consumer, pay for the connectivity and the service. So I think it's you really put different services together in packages, and they will have different values. And hence, it will be different.
I think it's going to be the consumers going to pay for it. That's it. So, and then you may have a way of discounting, but then it's going to be the consumer. You're going to have to pay for it.
Okay, you heard it here. Consumers pay for it. Do we have time for more questions, or should we wrap up?
One more question. Just that point there. The asset as a service. So when we see those services you're talking about there, what about the insurance as a service being offered by the telco? Because the telco has usage based on insurance data today, and can process claims if they want. They could be an incumbent from the insurance industry. So what are we going to see, as well as PCB financing? When are we going to see insurance as a service?
We as carriers, we have the data points to vast majority, I should say, but still, it needs to be relevant. And we are not experts in insurance. We could be a part of changing business models for the insurance industry, helping them actually take the next steps of their product portfolios. But again, it needs to be relevant. I'm not a car manufacturer. These guys are, and they're good at it. So I mean, we should combine all these assets of competence, then we get the real values. It's not that we should start insurance companies or banks or building cars, because we're not good at it.
So you're already there, in a very different way. There's when you rent a car, you're already, it's insurance as a service for the duration of the rental. I think the objective there is to try and actually bring it down to a sharing economy, and there needs to be a lot of work for us to be able to get there. It's okay for us now to say when you rent a car, there's an insurance as a service for the duration of the rental. It's not as yet there to say that when I am sharing a car, what is the insurance liabilities out there, and can I have that as a service for the duration of my share? I think requires massive changes in that direction, not towards it.
Okay, thank you very much, panelists, and thanks everyone in the audience.